What's up, Vessel Youth? We are back today for another Hot Topics video, and so we're just going to reintroduce ourselves. I'm Maddie.
I am Brady.
I'm Jesse.
We're all Vessel Youth interns, and so today on Hot Topics we are going to be talking about spiritual gifts. Very exciting.
Focusing on if they're active nowadays.
We're going to be answering more question-focused this time, a lot of questions about the spiritual gifts, about their history and how they really began and when they started. But first we're going to start out by just listing what the spiritual gifts are. So Paul wrote in Corinthians, "Now to each one the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. To one there is given through the Spirit a message of wisdom, to another a message of knowledge by means of the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing, to another miraculous powers, to another prophecy, to another distinguishing between spirits, to another speaking in different kinds of tongues, and to still another the interpretation of tongues. All these are the work of one and the same Spirit, and he distributes them to each one just as he determines."
Right.
Yeah.
So they began in Acts, the day of Pentecost. I'm sure you're all familiar. When right before Jesus left, he was like, "I'm going to give you the Comforter, the Holy Spirit, when I leave, so you're not by yourself." Once I leave, we have Jesus inside us, but he meant more of an active role, I guess. So the Holy Spirit is kind of how we communicate with Jesus a lot, and people often say the feelings you get sometimes during worship, it can be the Holy Spirit and some of the faith. But the day of Pentecost was in Acts when they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and they had tongues of fire over their heads, and they're all speaking in tongues, and people thought they were just drunk fools after, but it was in the morning, but that's a separate issue. But anyways, so they definitely weren't drunk. They were definitely filled with the Holy Spirit, and so there's a debate nowadays about whether that was just the early church that was filled with the Holy Spirit and had the spiritual gifts, or if it's just all of modern church, the modern era. So it's kind of a debate that people have, which it's not a salvation issue, but I think it can be important and interesting. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so now we're just going to kind of answer some questions about the spiritual gifts and honestly whether or not they're still, what we think about them being active still in the church and in believers of Christ today. So the first question is kind of, what is a spiritual gift? It is a supernatural, and this is it sounds crazy when you say it like this, but it's an ability given to you by Christ through the gifts of the Holy Spirit. It's kind of like having a talent, but a talent and a spiritual gift aren't the same thing necessarily.
Because I think talents can be misused, but spiritual gifts are purely to glorify God. So you can't use a spiritual gift to glorify yourself. That's demonic and really bad. That's
not good.
Not good. Really bad. That's borderline blasphemous. Because imagine using the Holy Spirit gave it to you to worship Him, and you're using that for the opposite purpose.
I read something somewhere that said spiritual, a regular talent is an ability that God has gifted you with at your birth. When you were first born, it is a gift that you were just naturally given by Christ. But then a spiritual gift is a supernatural ability that God gave you at your rebirth. So when you became a Christian, when you dedicated your life to Christ, is when God really just settled that into you. Gave you that spiritual gift, that holy supernatural gift. It's not the same as oh, I'm a good painter. It's a different, it's a completely different skill set.
It's not it's not as much about yourself either. I think everyone can use the spiritual gifts or whatever. God can use anybody to heal someone else. He can use flawed individuals to heal people. So I think it can you can be more inclined to stuff, kind of that people are more inclined to connecting with people or teaching, stuff like that. Just in this area, people are more gifted in those areas. But I think everyone can do all of them if they have the Holy Spirit, and it's all the Holy Spirit working through them. It's never the person. It's never I don't have spiritual gifts. The Holy Spirit in me, the Spirit inside of me when I was reborn has the spiritual gifts. So I think that's cool.
Mm-hmm. I think one kind of good-ish example of a spiritual gift is honestly Solomon, the super wise. He was given the gift from God. He prayed to God, "God, I want the gift of wisdom." That wasn't something that happened to him when he was born, but it was given to him after a supernatural connection with Christ. So that's just kind of a similar example to what exactly goes on when you're receiving your spiritual gifts. And so I think kind of the next thing we can go into is, are spiritual gifts still active today? Are they still alive today? Because I feel that's one of the big debates in the church. What do you guys think about that?
It can cause serious division.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's why it's a hot topic.
I read somewhere that people said it's kind of a little bit self-righteous. I'm not calling people out, but to think that we don't need the spiritual gifts when we have Paul saw Jesus in the flesh, right in front of him on the road to Damascus, right? Yeah, and he was blinded by Jesus. Him, and we have all the apostles who lived with Jesus for 3 years, saw him resurrected. These people needed the Holy Spirit, like they needed the spiritual gifts. They needed that to happen to them, right? They were like fizzling out a little bit, stuff wasn't going too well. The Spirit came back, gave them comfort, gave them confidence. They needed that, so it's kind of like we don't even have any of that, and we think we can do without it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm probably not saying this too well, but so it's like, if Paul needed the spiritual gifts, then we definitely need spiritual gifts.
Mm-hmm. And there's definitely like still proof, I think, of spiritual gifts today. Like honestly, like the great preachers of the world, like Billy Graham, people like that, there's no way that they weren't touched by the Holy Spirit and their ability to speak and have that much knowledge. Honestly, the spirit of prophecy or the whole spiritual gift of knowledge, different ones like that,
like words of knowledge.
Exactly, like were bestowed upon people. I'm just using Billy Graham as an example because he was a radical speaker. He changed millions of lives through the messages that he spoke, and there's no way that he could have done that within his own power. That was the Holy Spirit working his gift inside of him and showing it out to the world. And not necessarily every spiritual gift is going to mean you're going to be the next Billy Graham. When you have the spiritual gift of like wisdom, just for example, that means you can show that wisdom to other people, like we're doing kind of in Vessel Youth, talking to younger people about Christ in a way that is truly knowledgeable and truly wise, and that is still forming a connection and still showing Christ's love through them. It doesn't necessarily have to be a huge, radical, oh my gosh, crazy thing.
But
it can be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Yeah, I think people don't argue like if Jesus can. Obviously, everyone, if you're a Christian, thinks God's omnipotent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they say like, would he? And I think that's kind of like a little bit disrespectful because I think if God can heal someone and there's no like, if that's his will, then it's gonna happen. Like if like a young person makes a mistake and they get like paralyzed or something, I definitely believe Jesus can heal them if they have enough faith, like 100%. Like I have no doubt in my mind that can definitely happen and can be used to glorify God. Then that guy can go on to like speak and be like, I was paralyzed when I was born or at a young age, and now Jesus healed me. And I like seeing that. I've seen healing not like that radical before, and I think it's just like, it's all used to glorify God. We gotta remember that. We're not, like when people talk about spiritual gifts, we're not just saying like they're healed just so they can walk. Like sure, that's probably part of it, but like most of it is to glorify God. Like that's the purpose, that's the reason we're made. So that's the reason the Holy Spirit, that's like the main aspect of it. It's really important. And like, I think any spiritual gift can happen. Like God can move mountains. I mean, we can move mountains, right? With faith. So I think it's like, I don't want to limit God to like
just
gift, like the occasional feeling in Sunday school, like where I get a little bit of a warm feeling in my chest. Like that's nothing compared to the God who created the universe, like come on.
And spiritual gifts are still alive and active today. All we have to do is look for them, look a little bit closer, because we can deny. If we don't look for them, we're not going to see it.
You gotta have faith.
Yeah, and faith is one of the spiritual gifts, extreme faith, radical faith, but that takes working with Christ daily to develop your relationship, to deepen your heart, to deepen your spirit. Like the apostles, they were so close to Christ. And I know it's different because Jesus was with them in their day, but we have access to the Bible, we have access to prayer, we have access to so many things to strengthen our relationship and to really strengthen the spiritual gifts that God has placed inside of us. That's actually the next question, is how do I use my spiritual gifts? So the Bible actually says to use your gifts in love and in service to others. Every single church needs believers with all sorts of different gifts. Like all of us want to do something different with our lives, but Christ has anointed each of us with a special gift to go out and spread his word through anything that we do. We all have different passions, but we still have gifts that Christ will use.
Right.
Yeah. So you guys can use your spiritual gift as long as you are deepening your relationship with Christ. And some people ask like, oh, how do I know what my spiritual gift is? How do I know what it's going to be? So that is just through self-reflection, praying to God, figuring out yourself. It's obviously not going to be something completely different from what you like to. It's going to be connected to who you are in some way. Like I like talking to people, I'm a very social person, but that means my spiritual gift isn't going to be something that's completely opposite of that. And so just self-reflection, prayer with Christ is one way that you can strengthen your relationship and start to discover the gift that he's given you uniquely, because he's given a gift to every single person within the church, every single person who believes in him at their rebirth.
Yeah, but I think everyone can use all the spiritual gifts that Jesus is with them, like speaking in tongues, healing, words of wisdom, prophecy, all that stuff. I think there's plenty of examples in the Bible, like the donkey gave words of wisdom to that guy. I don't remember, I'm sorry, the exact reference, but so use a donkey to like speak, right? So I'm saying like
words of
it's
wisdom.
the same God, and then we're thinking like there was no like like obvious change after the new church. I believe we're the same as the new church. I think nothing's changed other than just a few thousand years, 2,000 years, whatever. I think it's kind of sad. It's gotten a little bit stale, and I think if you go to other countries, you can kind of see some of the fire that was in the new church, and I think it's refreshing to see like people getting healed, demons getting like delivered out of people. It's crazy, and it just shows you how powerful this guy is, how real, how active he is. He's not some passive like old man with a white beard up in heaven. Gives you like, you can have a good feeling right now. He's like I'm gonna heal this guy. I'm gonna move this mountain. I'm gonna get this demon out of this guy right now.
He's not
it's crazy.
God.
Yeah, he's a radical God. He's not a passive.
Yeah, and if he can use a donkey, he can use you.
Yeah,
he can use
and
you.
everyone can have all the spiritual gifts. You just gotta pray for it and have faith.
Yeah, you have to have faith and deepen your relationship with Christ. You can't be apathetic and expect to move mountains with apathy.
Right.
Yeah, so
it's all about faith.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it on spiritual gifts. You guys can do your own research, look at more passages, the passage in Acts, the passage in Corinthians that we talked about in the beginning. And also there's honestly tests. I don't know how accurate the online tests are about spiritual gifts. Don't know how accurate that is. But if you're just curious about them, you can Google is a great resource. Look it up.
Yeah, but ultimately this is not, obviously salvation is the most important thing. So just because you disagree with someone about this doesn't mean you can still be friends. I think that's important to remember. To remember like it's not super important, it's just in there. It's good to talk about, but it's not like don't fight each other about it.
Yeah,
don't let's divide your families.
Yeah, don't let it divide you between other.
Just remember salvation. Jesus is our Lord and Savior. That's the most important. That's the most important thing. That's the only thing we need to know.
Yeah, but do your own research if you guys want to look more into it. But that's what we think. That's a couple of answers to a few questions about spiritual gifts from our own opinion and what we've read through different research, the Bible, different passages, all that good stuff. Yeah, so next week, what are we doing for Hot Topics next week? Do we know?
I'll pull it up.
Hold on, he's going to pull it up. So last time was the cost of following Jesus. This is spiritual gifts, and so we have a list. I think we have 10 in total different Hot Topics.
So next one, we're talking about hell.
Ooh.
So I'm not really sure where we're going to go with that.
Well, they're going to have to come back next week and find out and see what that's about. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you guys next week.